Hi, this week we're speaking to Dr. Pagani about his recent research on genomic analysis and the migration events during the peopling of Eurasia. So, Dr. Pagani, could you please give us a short summary of your paper?
Hello. Yes, thank you for this opportunity, of course. And I should say that our paper is part of a joint publication with other two important papers led by Professor Reich and Eske Willerslev. And jointly, I think the main contribution of our paper is to actually provide a big perspective on human population and the genomic diversity all over the world, I would say. And talking about our paper, I think the greatest contribution we provided is actually a very fine resolution database available to all researchers, which cover the whole of Eurasia. And as you can see from the maps of our sampling, actually, we have basically covered areas that were previously undersampled, particularly Central Asia and Siberia. And that enabled us to do a spatially explicit analysis where we actually compared the extent of genetic distances between population and with the geographic distances. And this enabled us to find some barriers, or in other words, places where people are less likely to exchange genes and places where people are more likely to exchange genes, and which are probably the places that are favored during the human expansions. This was one main chapter of our research. The second one was looking for patterns of genetic adaptation to new environments as humans left Africa. And because we managed to cover all these new places such as Siberia, Central Asia, and South Asia to some extent, we were able to identify a number of signals that shows that human population that settled into this new environment, they kind of accumulated genetic diversity that enabled them to survive to these new diets and new environmental stressors. So these were the two first main, aim of our research. Then, when we were studying genetic relationships between these populations, we also saw that there was something strange going on. And particularly, we saw that essentially any pair of African and non-African individuals would split. So their genes would diverge at around 75,000 years ago. This is very consistent, and we saw this was super consistent no matter what kind of pairs of individuals you would compare between non-Africans and Eurasians by and large, and Africans. This was super consistent at 75,000 years ago, but there was an exception, and the exception was represented by Papuans. The inhabitants of Papua New Guinea, we have 6 samples from those, from 2 populations out there, and these people were consistent instead, showing a slightly deeper divergence at 90,000 years ago. And we thought that this was something strange and worth investigating. And what we realized is that, of course, Papuans have additional genetic contribution from archaic hominins when compared to the rest of Eurasians. And this was already known that Papuans have a significant contribution from Denisovan, which is one of our extinct ancestors, extinct relatives, not ancestors, of course. And then we thought, okay, maybe the strangeness we see in this Papuan genome could be due to the presence of the Denisova genome in Papuans, and we carefully corrected for that. So we were able to identify where in the genome of Papuans this Denisova signal was, where this archaic genetic component was. We removed that with some bioinformatic tools, and after taking into account this well-known fact, we're still seeing this phenomenon. In other words, that Papuans were somewhat more divergent from African than the rest of Eurasians. So we carried out our analysis, and eventually we identified that actually Papuans include within their genome something that is at least 2% of human genome that we believe derives from an early migration out of Africa, which we think took place after 120,000 years ago. And this was somewhat novel, of course, and although it is still consistent within the broader picture provided by the 2 other studies from Reich and Willerslev, because indeed we can clearly say that all the non-African individuals present today that we can sample and which we have sampled so far, all derive from a single out-of-Africa migration. And that on top of this, Papuans just showed this kind of 2% remains from this otherwise extinct earlier out-of-Africa migration. So these are pretty much the 3 main results of our study.
That's really interesting. Most people know about the out-of-Africa theory. So these new genomes, does that support that theory?
yeah, of course, they support and they support the view that a single migration that took place after 75,000 years ago is responsible for the peopling of the whole of Eurasia and America. We add to this theory and to these results that were previously found and confirmed by these three studies, we add that actually there was an additional out of Africa, so that took place before, and that basically left no descendants outside of Africa except for this tiny exception in Papua.
And does the fossil data, the physical remains, does that reflect what you're seeing in the genomic data?
Well, yeah, this is interesting actually. I mean, the single out of Africa expansion 75,000 after 75,000 years ago is of course compelling, but cannot explain the presence of modern human remains outside of Africa prior to that. And we already know that there are some fossils dated at around 100,000 years ago in the Near East, and maybe also some human teeth in China dated to 80,000 years ago, even though the dating is still under debate at the moment. So we believe that even though we cannot, of course, claim that what we found in Papua is related to the people who left these fossils outside of Africa, it is, well, let's say, interesting to see that maybe genetics can tell us more about what other migration could have produced such fossils.
And you mentioned that this research and the data panel is accessible to lots of other people. What do you think this means for future research and future collaborations?
Well, yes, it's freely available, and we encourage everyone to download it from the public repository and from the website of the Estonian Biocenter. And I think this is, generally speaking, a very good message, that many research groups are actually more and more making their genome and their data available, because this is a wealth of data that the global genetic community and researchers in general can benefit from. And on top of that, this also means that people can actually go into our data and replicate the analysis we did and confirm or maybe compute what we found. And this is, I think, it's the basic meaning of having a scientific community that actually checks what other people do.
Yeah, that's brilliant. The fact that other people can use this to further research, that sounds great. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll put a link to the paper below this video. Thank you very much. Bye.
Okay, well, and thank you for the opportunity. Bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you. It's great speaking to you.